Hello everyone, and welcome to a webinar hosted by the Cloud Standards Customer Council. My name is Tracy Berardi, and I'm Program Manager of the CSCC. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to explore a new hybrid integration reference architecture that we just published in March. As you know, IT environments are now fundamentally hybrid in nature as devices, systems, and people are spread across the globe and at the same time virtualized. And achieving integration is a significant challenge, and that is what this paper seeks to address. So thank you so much. Just moving on to the next little slide here. For background, the CSCC is an end-user advocacy group dedicated to accelerating cloud successful adoption. We work with standards bodies, open source groups, and end-user organizations to publish vendor-neutral guides on important cloud topics, including hybrid cloud computing and integration requirements. Our work helps to influence standards of practice. So this slide contains a snapshot of some of the papers we've published since our inception back in 2011. You can see in red there, hybrid integration, first paper of this quarter. We're really excited about, and we have many more coming in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned. We invite you to visit our website. It's cloud-council.org to read this material and consider joining as a member. You'll be the first informed as we publish new content, and you're welcome to contribute to content that's of interest to you. We have different working groups. You can check out our content calendar that's up on the site. And also, membership is free. It's an open membership group, and we'd love to have you. So the CSCC, we've been working on this series of cloud solution or cloud reference architectures, and hybrid integration is really the latest that's been published in the series. And here you can find direct links to papers that will help you understand how to leverage cloud computing for things like e-commerce, supporting the Internet of Things, big data and analytics capabilities, mobile applications, web app hosting, and also social collaboration. And at a high level, these reference architectures, they're straightforward descriptions of elements needed to implement particular application solutions using cloud infrastructure, cloud platforms, cloud software, and cloud services. They're all deployment neutral, meaning you can use public, private, or hybrid cloud environments, and they're implementable using infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. They're vendor neutral, they're open, so you can use these in your travels. There's a combination of general purpose architectures as well as ones that are useful for particular domains. We find them helpful for communication between cloud customers and vendors. So in the Attachments tab here on BrightTalk, you can download a copy, a PDF of today's presentation, and we also have a link in there to the reference architecture in its entirety. And we should have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, so you're welcome to submit questions through the Questions tab. Today I'm joined by my colleagues, Swami Balasubramanian, hi Swami, and Tien Nguyen, who helped to write hybrid integration. So without further ado, pull up the slide for you. Swami, it's over to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Good morning, all. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Swami Balasubramanian. I work in the cloud division of IBM. I'll be walking you through the next 20-odd slides around this reference architecture. Let me start with an overview of hybrid integration. IT environments have fundamentally changed. Gone are the days when you have to go to the office to access your work data. Today, devices, systems, and people are spread across the globe, and they all need to integrate. So there are three significant challenges that many modern enterprises face. Number one is integrating in an ever-changing environment. Number two is keeping pace with digital initiatives. And number three is effectively managing this landscape. Now, we are seeing some common patterns emerge as enterprises address these challenges. The hybrid integration reference architecture essentially captures these patterns. One point I wanted to make around this particular reference architecture, hybrid integration can be looked at from many standpoints, application, data, infrastructure, etc. This particular reference architecture is, from an application perspective, essentially how to build a seamless integration from cloud to on-prem. Moving on. This reference architecture addresses four important considerations. The first one is around connectivity. Integration is about connecting devices and systems. This may be low-level connectivity to systems of record or digital connectivity in the cloud. In both cases, any system anywhere needs to be enabled as a first-class citizen in the integration landscape. The second consideration is around deployment. Integration components must offer flexible deployment options, whether it's being run on-prem within the enterprise or if it's being deployed within the cloud. At the same time, whether it's run on bare metal in virtual machines or within containers, the integration components need to be able to integrate both within and across network and security boundaries. The third consideration is around roles. In the past, a single IT team used to manage all of the enterprise's IT. Now, this has fundamentally changed. Today, you have the central IT team still managing the core enterprise assets, but at the same time, there are digital IT teams aligned to lines of businesses that are rapidly developing new applications that cater to emerging opportunities in the marketplace. So integration needs to be easy. Everyone needs to be able to easily connect components without needing an integration specialist. And the fourth consideration is around style. Siloed monolithic applications are slowly becoming a thing of the past. The newer architectural styles coming in are distributed, where components are independent yet loosely coupled and highly cohesive. To support these emerging approaches, this reference architecture uses gateways for APIs, events, and data. Using these gateways, what we're able to do is develop architectures that offer a seamless integration from cloud to on-prem. Moving on to the next slide. This slide, the schematic here is the architecture overview for this for the hybrid integration reference architecture. It's made up of three layers: the public network, the cloud provider network, and the enterprise network. There is a single cloud provider network shown here, but obviously many enterprises may have more than one cloud provider network. Security goes across these layers, handles authentication, whether it is user authentication, an entitlement coming in, or if it's application entitlement. That's all handled by the security component. And then if you see the three, the gateways that I talked about, the API, the event, and the data, those are the dotted lines around components. Interaction APIs and system APIs together form that represents the API gateway into the enterprise. Likewise, the event is the cloud messaging and the enterprise messaging. And then finally, the data gateway represented by the cloud integration and the enterprise integration. In the next few slides, what we'll do is I'll walk you through each one of these components in a little bit more detail, explaining what the capabilities are of each of those components. So moving on, the first one is around the users that access applications. That's on the cloud provider network. They could come in from a browser, or they could come in from a mobile native app, on a smartphone, on a smartwatch, etc. Now the users could be of different types. Could be end consumers. They could be enterprise line of business users of the cloud applications, or they could also be the administrative users of the enterprise from the line of business, the digital IT team that we talked about previously, that manage the components that are deployed within the cloud network. Next, we'll look at edge services. These provide capabilities needed to deliver both function and content to the users via the internet. Edge services could include capabilities like domain name service, content delivery, firewall, load balancers, etc. Moving on. The cloud application component, this component represents the application that is designed and developed within the cloud environment. So the cloud native application. And we see these applications tend to use modern techniques such as microservices architecture. They use lightweight runtimes, container technology, and things like DevOps. Moving on to the API gateway and the interaction API. This component really is the API gateway into the enterprise. It provides access to enterprise capabilities. These are APIs that are maintained by the line of business digital IT teams. They are typically composed from lower level fine-grained system APIs. These APIs are business-led as opposed to being more enterprise-focused. And these APIs look to cater to market needs rather than being driven by the underlying enterprise systems. Moving on to the event gateway that is represented by the cloud messaging component. This component provides fast, scalable, high throughput event delivery both to and from the enterprise and this component running in the cloud. And like I said, this is the event gateway into the enterprise network. Moving on. This third component is the data gateway into the enterprise. The cloud integration services component, it provides simple, rapid, and flexible capabilities for cloud services and other third-party applications to integrate with enterprise applications and data. So this component, you can think of this as the gateway into the systems of records within the enterprise. Moving on. The transformation and connectivity component really provides the secure connection into the enterprise. It handles things like enterprise secure connectivity, transformation, enterprise data connectivity, all those types of capabilities. So next we'll talk about the sort of the counterpart components to the three gateways that we talked about on the cloud, the system APIs, the enterprise messaging component, and the enterprise integration services component. So let's look at the system APIs. System APIs provide access to enterprise applications and data. And we typically have the system APIs maintained by the central IT team that we talked about around roles. And they are typically lower level fine-grained APIs. You may have multiple interaction APIs components that consume these APIs, and those interaction APIs are composed higher level capabilities by accessing these fine-grained APIs offered by the system APIs component. Moving on to the enterprise messaging. Enterprise messaging, it represents the messaging backbone of the enterprise. This is the primary messaging interface into the enterprise for all of the cloud messaging components. And this handles things like secure and reliable messaging, heterogeneous application platform, high performance, etc. Then moving on to the enterprise integration services. This component represents the the very broad variety of integrations that are available within the enterprise. These include enterprise application integration components, ETL systems, business process management systems that all exist within the enterprise network. And again, this is the counterpart for the data gateway into the enterprise. Moving on to the next slide. The enterprise application represents all the applications that are run within the enterprise, applications that run the business processes and logic within existing enterprise systems. And then the enterprise data represents the one or several systems of records within the enterprise, include transactional data, data warehouses, and it's meant to represent all of the existing data within the enterprise. Moving on to security. Security for hybrid integration, it addresses integrity, threat management, compliance. So it's really, it goes across all these layers, and as I mentioned earlier, it covers the security both from authentication and entitlement of users coming in, and of applications and of components in the cloud that are connecting to the enterprise system. Moving on. So having gone through the architecture and the components that make up the architecture, there are a couple of use case scenarios that I'll walk through. I think it sort of helps tie everything together. And one point to note is, obviously we talked about the gateways of the APIs, the messaging, and the data. And for every use case, for every solution that applies this architecture, all of these gateways don't necessarily need to exist. And you'll see that in the second use case where that's the case. So this use case, this is a scenario where it's an international bank. The CTO wants to unlock value of the bank's business assets by deploying a set of fine-grained system APIs that allow access to some key enterprise capabilities and processes. Now, at the same time, the chief marketing officer wants to expand the bank's market reach by deploying new cloud applications and APIs to new channels, to new interactive channels that would use these enterprise capabilities and essentially accelerate banking transactions, improve customer experience, so reach out to new market opportunities. Now, the way this flow is set up, you can actually see the numbers on the schematic, and as I walk through the steps, if you follow along with those numbers that describe what's going on in each step. So in the first step, the bank customers comes in, accesses the cloud application. They could come in from either the browser or come in from a mobile app, and at different times could use either one of these devices to get to the same capabilities. So the request that is made by the user gets routed through the edge services that processes the request, handles the routing to the correct destination. The security component is involved to validate the user, ensure that the user is who he or she says they are, through identity and access management. Once that's done, the request is received by the cloud application. This would be a cloud native, sort of the born on the cloud type application. It's received by the cloud application, and it uses asynchronous processing. The cloud application invokes both the interaction APIs and the cloud integration services component. Then in step 5, the interaction APIs, that is the API gateway. The interaction APIs component receives the request. It determines what services that need to be involved, and to process the request, this component would make several successive calls to the system APIs component. So, for example, if the customer is coming in with a loan request, there may be calls to do risk validation, calls to do credit processing, and these would be, you can imagine these are individual system APIs that handle these. But as part of the request, as part of handling the request, the interaction APIs makes these successive calls to these different system APIs. In step 6, the request is received by the Cloud Integration Services component to access the enterprise data. This would interface with the Enterprise Integration Services component to retrieve and return any enterprise data back to the callers. The Cloud Integration Services, again, just as a reminder, represents the data gateway into the enterprise. The cloud messaging is there to allow processing of events and triggers across cloud applications and on-prem. So in this case, a scenario where the process is submitted asynchronously and the decision is returned back to the user through a push notification. That's where the messaging components handle the response back from the enterprise back up to the user. And then in step 8, the secure transformation connectivity component handles the routing of the API request to the system APIs component and the data request to the enterprise integration services component. And then back in step 9, the application and data component, they individually process their requests. The responses are all returned back through the enterprise and the cloud gateways back to the cloud application, which in turn prepares and returns the final response back to the user. So that describes the end-to-end flow here, where we use all 3 gateways in order to realize this use case. Moving on to the next slide. This is the second scenario, and this is a scenario where we have a use case which does not really require all 3 gateways. So we take advantage of the API and the event gateway, but not the data gateway. And again, this is just to illustrate that all 3 gateways is not required in every solution. So this is this schematic, again, it works similar to the previous one with the numbering. This schematic illustrates a scenario where an insurance company is rewarding their members with premium discounts if they participate in fitness activities. At the same time, they don't want members who might be in a high-risk category to sort of overexert themselves and create a health situation. And so they have business rules that handle that, that can look at the data and make a determination of whether there's any risk with those activities given a particular member's health data. So when a situation like that is determined, the company would want to send alert notifications to the member. So starting with step 1, the flow is a little different here. I'll try to walk through it. You can see the numbering along the arrow sort of show the flow of information or data. So in step 1, the member uses a mobile app to log their calories and track their walking steps. So this could be a smartphone, could be a smartwatch, etc. So once this data is collected, these events then are sent into the cloud app, and the cloud application then places them in the using the event gateway, the cloud messaging component places them in a queue for an on-prem application to aggregate and compute the discount percentage. So going through the cloud messaging component through the secure transformation and connectivity, received by the enterprise messaging component, and then eventually it reaches the enterprise application that would process this data and determine what the discard percentage is that needs to be given to the member. Now, at the same time, in step number 2, the member's doctor receives test results. He logs into the hospital portal to report all that test data, and being a partner to the insurance company, the hospital's portal uses an interaction API, and if you follow along step the label 2 on the schematic, that data that the doctor just provided goes through the API gateway from the interaction API, and then at step number 3, the interaction API then invokes an on-prem system API to process that data. So again, that going through the transformation and connectivity and getting to the system API, that data is then sent to a component. Now, in step 4, the system API triggers an enterprise business process to handle the data, and the business process then uses business rules, which I talked about earlier, to process that data, and it detects that the member is having a specific heart condition, but at the same time is participating in a very rigorous fitness activity, which could prove very risky for the member. And therefore, in step 4, the enterprise application then responds back with an alert that travels through the enterprise messaging to the cloud messaging component, essentially the event gateway, and then onto a cloud services component that handles the mobile push notification, and sends an alert through that component out to the member using an SMS, text, or a mobile alert. So that completes the use case where we took advantage of the API gateway and the event gateway to realize the use case. So I think that completes the walkthrough of the reference architecture and the component. I'd encourage you to go read the entire document that describes these in a lot more detail. So with that, Tracy, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the really good recap. Nice and quick, too. So we have all sorts of time here if folks would like to submit questions. We do have a couple, and Tien is also on the line to help answer questions. But on this slide, there's just some links if you're interested in joining. As I mentioned, it's free, open membership. We'd love to have you. What we do is, as we publish a paper, we send an email alert out that it's available to read. We host a webinar with the authors, or a portion of the authors, because we can't have all of them on at the same time. And we send a quarterly newsletter, and so we would love to have you in our network. And there's a link here to the working groups. We have 4 different topical working groups, and also on this working groups page you could see our tentative calendar for the year. And let's see, this next slide, I went ahead and just pulled out from the papers that we've published a few that I think you might like to check out because they're related. We have a practical guide to hybrid cloud computing, practical guide to cloud service agreements and SLAs. We have a couple of really good security papers. This Security for Cloud Computing 10 Steps to Ensure Success was updated not long ago. We also have a security standards guide, an overview of all the security standards that would apply to cloud computing. And then some links again to other architectures in the series. Let's move on to some questions here. First question, shouldn't a hybrid integration architecture consider things like system APIs, process APIs, experience APIs? Have you given some thought to this? And Swami, Tien, either of you, if you feel like jumping in, you're welcome.
Sure. It's Jen. Yes. So in this particular paper, we looked at hybrid integration more from an umbrella perspective, where it goes into various style of integration, as the Swami had talked about, and we have kind of narrowed down to the three styles. Right? So API is one of them, where it is more of an abstracted synchronous call, a function call, and the backend is abstracted out. You just call for the function. And so the system APIs and process APIs are all abstracted out from that particular interface. So the messaging part could have APIs into the event hub that where you do you post an event for pops up into a topic, but the style of interaction is really more asynchronous. Fire and forget. You put it there, and then the backend would handle the event. And again, this is all abstracted out. And then the third category is also something that could have an API interface or REST interface, but it is more aware of what your backend is. So, for example, if you are connecting directly to a database to sync your cloud data with your DB2 or Oracle database in the backend, so those connectors are more aware of the technology. So it's less abstraction there, but it's also be exposed to an API. So API plays a crucial role in hybrid integration, but we are focusing more on the style of integration. And I just want to say that we are going to announce another CSCC talk on API management in the next month or so to focus just on the area of API.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I know that's nearing completion, so look for that paper coming out soon.
Right.
Then there's a comment here. Thanks for the clear documentation. And yes, that's true. As a reminder, in the attachments and links tab, there's a PDF download of the slides from today and a link to the architecture that you can explore in more detail. But that's actually it for questions. So I think we can give the attendees some time back in their days. We really appreciate you joining us, and thank you again, Swami and Tien, for the great presentation. Everyone, have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.